them. So this is the shortest version. She's done so many things. This is a short version. Member of the European Parliament, she is a member of in the Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs, Committee on the Environment, Public Health and Food Safety, in the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality, and in the Special Committee on Tax Rulings and other measures similar in nature or effects. As the current key positions of trust, she is a member of the board at publicly listed company called Kone, Fortum Advisory Council and Lammi Savings Bank. And furthermore, she is a chairman of the board at the Finnish Lifelong Learning Foundation and at Kone Foundation, the advisory board of the Saari residence. So with these titles, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sirpa Pietikäinen.
So good morning everybody, and I'm very delighted to be here and talking about the Arctic, sustainable development and the paradigm change. And after my visit to Oulu University, your university hospital and some of innovations done here, I'm really convinced that you are going to do exciting things on here. And as you pretty much guessed by this far, I'm not going to give you any answers. But quite a number of some questions, and maybe help you to direct your sort of a scope of research, innovations, and new business models. Because, you know, the hardest thing in the world and in the science is to know what you do not know. And you know this fallacy that you think how things are, it is the picture in your mind, and you see what you expect to see, and you act accordingly. And if you do not sort of learn out of your system the way you used to see things, it's very difficult to relearn the new way of thinking. And this is sort of shown pretty many times in the history. You might think of the Copernicus or Galileo Galilei, who sort of invented that maybe the solar system actually doesn't function in the way the church used to think it. And always then you are going to face opposition. Because new way of thinking, even though it's not threatening, I don't know how God or even the bishops should have been upset with the fact that someone sort of figured out how the solar system actually is functioning, but it is felt like a threat. And this is something what we have to overcome. Okay, what are then the big disruptors? We heard already about the disruption, what the big data, or what comes with that, and the whole digitalization, information technology coming to products and services, almost everywhere where it is possible is going to face. And it was very interesting to hear Siemens, who is doing very great business in this field in Europe. But then another one big disruption thing is resource efficiency and climate change. And this is a bit like, you know, the solar system fact. It's happening, and it is out there, whether you like it or not, and you just can't sort of vote it out by thinking differently. And if we look at the Arctic region, it has many challenges but possibilities too. Interestingly enough, approximately 4 million people live in this region, and including some of the remaining indigenous people in the world. 4 million. In the area that is basically from the North Pole, connecting all the main continents. Just to give you the comparison, in Europe we have 500 million people. You draw a circle from Shanghai, about 1,000 kilometers, and you have approximately half of the world's population and more than half of the GDP on that area. This means the thing that you know. This is not densely populated. Very sparsely populated, little people, a lot of resources. a lot of possibilities and a lot of challenges. It is growing in geopolitical importance, as you know, because of the climate change that is going to do quite some shaking in many business models and on the area itself. Because, as you know, while the predicted climate change effect within 30, 40 years, if we do not make major changes, so this includes all the Paris agreements and all the decisions and legislation that the EU has been doing, is approximately 4 degrees. And that would mean in Arctic region above 6 degrees. It is a substantial change in vegetation, in habitats, in permafrost, in possibilities to use the Nordic route in logistics on shipping. And some people are seeing it a pretty happy thing, but actually this is very vulnerable ecosystem, and it's hard to know what you do not know. What are going to be the implications? But what we do know is that the implications are going to be stronger than in some other parts of the world. They are going to be prolonged, and then they impact on the other parts of the ecosystems are much stronger. Well, you know it all. If you lose the forest cover, it has always impact on many other things, just to give an example. And probably you've been looking your Twitter news feed and whatever to notice that it is even greater and greater patches of the Arctic and Antarctic ice shell that is being cut off from both ends. And it has been significantly diminished from 1980s. Well, that is going to rise, of course, the global sea levels, but this is going to speed up the changes in the Arctic much faster and globally than what we think. Just to give you an example, when I was the Minister for Environment in Rio conference, we did know and we did predict more or less everything what we see, but the prediction was that I was never being able to see it because it was predicted it is beyond 2150 when you start seeing, for example, Arctic permafrost melting or Arctic ice shell being cut off. And what do we see now? And I'm not even close 100. So you can imagine what this acceleration fact is going to mean within, let's say, as short period as 20 or 30 years from now. So this is something that is going to have a great impact. And I suppose we in Finland and in Nordic parts of the world and Arctic region are having and should have a great interest on that. What this is going to mean? How can we prevent it? How can we plan sustainable logistics and other issues on this area? Then another one that I was mentioning, besides the digitalization, is the fact of the resource efficiency. And when we are talking about resources, we are not only talking about coal and wood and copper and aluminium and tellurium and whatever resources the industries are using. We are talking about the ecosystem services, the ability of the ecosystem to clean up the air, so produce clean air, produce clean water, to maintain biodiversity, and to repair in great extent the harms that different kind of processes are done for the ecosystems. So we would need to create a sustainable use of resources. And to give you a hint, we would need totally to change our paradigm, and this is the Copernican change. Now we have sort of a silo, and there it sort of starts to ache the head. We have a silo approach. I don't know what have you been studied or what you are working with, but probably you are pretty good or excellent on your work. It can be in medicine, can be in administration, governance, industrial processes, mining, you name it. But when you are doing this kind of a silo approach, and in your mind you have this kind of a Cartesian way of thinking, you separate issues that are interlinked. And it's like someone would give you 20,000 pieces of a puzzle, but not sort of showing you the big cover, what you should be doing out of these pieces. And you would be doing conferences, science or whatever, governance, administration, speed dating. Is this blue matching with this blue, and is this going to be sea or sky, or what are we doing? And this reductionism has created us tremendous good, especially on science, as we know, life sciences, for example, but a lot of problems. And at the moment, we are not able to solve our biggest challenges that are system challenges because of this approach. Okay, to give you some example what that is that we think that economics, I come from that sort of a school of thought, and it is very helpful, but you think that economics is economics. You can't mix oil and water. A lot of my good colleagues, when I start talking about the environmental and ecosystem indicators and how you should incorporate it to, for example, in Moody's processes, in looking what are the threats for economy or banking regulation, they say, no, you deal with the environment here, there. We are dealing with economic risk. And sort of start thinking that environmental risk is going to be sunk investments and economic risk in longer run anyway, so you have to incorporate the credit rating agencies' ratings with environmental risks too. So yes, we have economies. How do we could build a good, sustainable, flourishing new industrial system, for example, here in Oulu? And then we have a human societies, you know. There we debate, what do we do with the elderly population? How do you get the services to Kärsämäki, or what kind of a sote you should build on here? Totally different school of thought. And then you have their earth life supporting system, the nature. There's the wood, you go and cut it. There's the mining, there's whatever is needed. And they all are one. And if you can't look at the interactions by system-wise, you do not see, you miss the big questions, what this is all about. And sort of changing this approach to holistic. Basically, it is as simple as walking and chewing the chewing gum at the same time. Or making a soup out of the recipe. You have to take all of the ingredients and the interactions together. You have to have understanding what happens if you put on the porridge salt or sugar or both of them. And you can't figure out only out of the list of the ingredients how this soup is going to, for example, salmon soup is going to taste like or look like if you look at the parts. So the holistic needs to make all the sustainability actions to happen simultaneously. And there you can see some of the examples, but basically it needs to be sustainably, and this is the prerequisite from the Earth life supporting systems wise. It needs to be sustainable for people and people's living. And it, of course, needs to be competitive and sustainable on economic wise. And if you miss or you hurt one of these links, it's a bad idea. You shouldn't be doing it. You can't sort of fix it by later on. And this is sort of the spillover effect otherwise you see. You see it in bioenergy. You transform some parts of the production of the energy, and if this is not sustainable on biomass criteria or food production criteria, you think this is a better than just producing out of the fossils. Oops, what did I do on this field? You transform the transportation from one system to another system. Oops, why the limits are coming on here? Or by people when you create services, and if you sort of destroy the personal or the near structure self-supporting systems. Okay, just to give you this kind of a cold shower for the morning, that we would need to get the scale of the challenge right. We are exceeding all important limits of the planet. I was going to say, no, I do not have another picture of it here. But the point is, you can find it if you look, if you Google planetary boundaries. Climate change, you know. Did you know that we are on the midst of the big sixth extinction wave in what we have had in this planet? And did you know what happened always after the big extinctions waves? Well, do not worry, it will recover. It only takes about 400 to 600 millions of years to get the balance right. For nature and for the planet, pretty okay. For you and me and our children, a bit of a challenge. We are running out of our fertilizers. This is one of the most acute challenges, by the way, for you too, for the research. And guess what happens for the fertilizers when you leak it out of the fields to the lakes and seas? It's called pollution. And the problem on the Baltic Sea, for example. We are over limits in the use of major resources in new hazards like GMO, like nuclear, like nanoparticles. I'm not saying that they are bad. I'm saying that then when you add a piece that you do not know, you do not know what is going to be the complex interactive system changes in the longer run. And then that's one of the questions. And then you know the quality of the water, you know the plastic soups on the seas and sweet water sources, this and that. And what then is the big question? The big question is that the answer needs to be in line with the challenges. And if we listen to the scientists from the ecosystem services side and from the environmental economics, what they say is that you would need to make the same services for human beings. We are going to be from 6 billion to 9 billion within 30 years. You would need to make the same competitive edge for companies, because you can't ruin down your economy. And you would need to make the whole societal economies balanced with 1/10 of the resources. 1/10. With 1/10 of the resources we are using now. And to get there, it's a bit that I should be running the marathon. You need to get out of the linear thinking. Because if you try to tweak the existing system slightly better, you get it slightly better. And this is, so to say, the diesel motor and the Volkswagen case. You get slightly better diesel motors. But you do not get the car service or the mobility service so that it would be carbon neutral and with 1/10 of the energy and other resources it's going to use. And then you just say, no, you can't, politicians do not demand this from us, I can't do it. But you have to do it. Sooner or later you have to do it because it's a bit like speeding directly towards the wall. The car is going to stop anyway. I'm not worried about that. The point is when it's going to happen and what are going to be the side costs. You do it earlier you can find a new better route. You do it later, then you recover out of the catastrophe. Then the second point what comes out of there is this backcasting. Okay, and this is the recipe. Everything in business, in societal services would need to be with tenth of the resources. Important. Non-renewables in basically, not technically, literally, but basically in totally closed loops. There isn't such a thing as a waste in the future. So, and there comes the term circular economy. The resources needs to circle in production system. And with the renewables, they need to circle there at least 10 times because you need to get the factor 10 on the effectiveness of the use. And it means that you shouldn't destroy at all anymore, because we are on the brink already, the biodiversity. That, by the way, comes to the debates of the old forests and management of the forest in Finland, because we happen to be 75% forest cover. So for us, the biodiversity issue is, in great extent, the forest issue. And no emissions. Or then the emissions are so minor that they are on the limits of the nature's not carrying capacity, because that would mean accumulation, for example, of toxic particles on the soil or waters. It means on the cleaning capacity. This is roughly 1/10 than what we are doing now after purification of our wastewaters or air or whatever. And there you can see, you can't do it linear. You have to think the whole recipe all over again. And what is disruptive here is two big things happening. This circular economy, with 10 of the resources in the closed loops, and digitalization. You need to marry these two. What comes out of marrying these two? And this I do not have, luckily, the answer, because then the answer would be too limited, but this is sort of the question for you in all of your activities. What comes out when I marry these two things? And one interesting thing is here's some definitions of the resource efficiency, what it means. It means that the information is the new capital in many of the activities. More important than the money or the resources themselves. Information, this comes from the big data. It means that the economies are going to come service economies. We have already interface carpet companies leasing the carpets, IKEA planning to lease kitchen cupboards, Michelin leasing the tires for heavy machinery and all that. So basically the question is that when you think of the business model, can you sell it as a service? And basically very many things can be sold as a service. And this is important because of the fact that that changes the earning logics in the business. Otherwise you sell less and more expensively. It's a bit of a sort of a hardship in the global sphere where half of the world is in Asia and producing more and cheap. And this change of the earning logistics is important. It changes the business ecosystems because if the resources needs to circle, you can't do it by yourself and you can't sort of resource it out of your system saying, okay, this is waste, do whatever you want. You have to plan how your bottles are circulated or your tires, which part are you repairing, upgrading, reusing yourself, which parts are you going to use in reproduction. You have to master logistics. The second point, logistics is coming more and more important. And this is interesting part in many fields. Service and logistics goes in hand. For example, self-driving cars. Why do I need my car that is 90%? Now it, by the way, happens to stand in my yard in Hämeenlinna. It could be in railway station or in the airport. 90% these are not used. And the resource efficiency in great deal for here, for example, in here comes from the more effective use of the capacity. Or then that the batteries, electric batteries of the cars are going to be used as energy storages. It means that, for example, you have to plan what materials you use and where. Now, the pallets, you know what the pallets are. They are basically single-use, made out of the wood, sent to China, then Chinese back to Finland, and you burn them. Ineffective. And there are existing models already where you use plastics. Plastics is a problem, but it's a good material, depends where and how you use it. The point is that you can use the side stream of the wood industry and recycled plastics and make pallets, and you incorporate the chips so you can follow up where they are, and you sell the pallets as a service. You follow up, like you know in these cars, you follow up where the pallets are globally or locally, and you just don't send them back to home and then again, but you send them to the nearest next place. The information means transportation, pallets, goods, very many issues. And what is interesting here in the Arctic and logistics is that I mentioned that the seafare is going to increase in the Arctic area. It's going to increase our roads and on our rails if we do not anything. It's going to not only double, but triple or 4 times increase because we have the more and more gadgets all over the world within 30 years. They can't stand that. And if you solve it then later on, if you construct more ships and roads, this is not the answer. The answer is, what do you effectively transform from where and how and to where? And is it going to be sent back, or is it going to be reassembled, disassembled, and then repaired? What are the processes? With all these drones and information, do you always drive yourself to the supermarkets looking, what kind of a toilet papers and detergents here are? Fascinated. Or is for example, your washing machines and refrigerators going to order these kind of simple things back to your home, and you go then to Kauppahalli to buy the nice little things you want to look and touch. There's a lot of this kind of disruptive changes that make new kind of business models. And what I leave with you here is, what are the business models? And why it is very interesting on this field too, is that Arctic area, long distances, right? Very vulnerable, sensitive nature, right? Little people, not that many. It can be as a huge good laboratory to create and test the models like we are testing already, for example, the automated transportation. Let's leave some of the rest of ideas. Here you have the platform economy, what kind of possibilities you have there. But European Commission has the Digital Single Market Initiative, where you can see what kind of elements there are. And there's actually quite a lot of money to be used. And this money is innovative research. And in some cases, you can get exceptions on EU regulation to implement the testing. And the point is, they should be system-wise experiments on mobility, on production, on logistics, or then, and that would be my last half minute, about e-health. because Oulu and Finland happens to be excellent on digital innovations and health. And this would be extremely good area to develop new kind of thinking on this health area. And this is one of the grave sadnesses for me in this SOTE. You are fighting over the walls, and the elderly, quite often ladies, need to come further and further inside the walls to meet the doctor, right? And that's why you want to have the walls there in Kärsämäki, because it's unreasonable for the lady always to travel 60 kilometers. And you could provide more than 80% nowadays of the services at home. It is the remote connection, your favorite doctor. Don't cut that connection via Skype. It is the pocket laboratories where you can test basically all basic laboratory tests with your finger, like blood sugar nowadays. It is about the remote analysis of the lungs, so you can hear if the lady is having pneumonia. It is about follow-up of arrhythmia in cardiac conditions. It's about this and that. A lot of these innovations are done here in the Oulu. But the point is they are not helpful if you don't turn down the planning, then again, the system thinking in the healthcare. Because car is not the horse where you fix the wheels. And this is the way how we are trying to use the digitalization quite often in the healthcare. You have the existing system and then you fix the wheels on the horse and you think that now you've done it and you wonder why it doesn't work and works even worse than the old one. You need to fix the system according to the concept. What services at home? How you get the big data together? How you get the interoperable systems you heard from the Siemens so that you can analyze and the doctor can connect? How you create the services, this means in certain cases doctors, nurses to get you home. How you have remote pharmacies because you need the medication if you need the IV for the pneumonia. It's totally different kind of an idea. And it's not the industrial system, the hospital anymore in the future. It's a platform, a bit platform like the Siemens, where private and public together can solve the issues on site, but remotely too. And not only this kind of a Dr. Watsons. It means that you can pack the whole hospital basically in one of the ambulances. You can actually take almost all, not the hip operation or the cardiac open operation to home, but quite a big deal of these operations can be done there at the home and the recuperation times are short and all that. So please do plan that kind of a system, sort of a, if we didn't have a health system, but we had all this, what we know already is existing and on the pipeline in health innovations, what kind of a system we would plan? And this is system thinking, this is system modeling, and I think that it would be easy to get money for that firstly. Secondly, this is the thing you sell to China. Not only one device by device if you don't know how to fix them together. But what is the good healthcare system that we have a very good understanding in theory in Finland? What it is and how you manage to everybody in the real world with the new possibilities of big data and information technology. Sorry for exceeding my time with a couple of the minutes, but I do tend to get a bit of excited, especially about the e-health. And if you have any initiatives or questions or willingness to activate yourselves in this fora, I'm more happy to help if I can be of help, sort of hooking you up with research possibilities or funding possibilities or the respective committees or civil servants in the EU level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sirpa.